Welcome in. It is Big Ten today. It is great to have you with us on this Thursday. Dave Revson, Andy Katz, Ann Arbor last night, Chicago this morning. We appreciate your dedication.
Of course, as always, very loyal viewer and participant.
Yes.
I got to say this right off the top.
Okay.
This will sound like a bit of a shill, but it's the truth. If the worst teams in this league are Michigan and Ohio State, based on the talent on those rosters, that's the worst two teams, and standings-wise, they are, then this league is pretty good.
Right. I think that is the huge difference this year, is it just feels like nothing is guaranteed.
No, there are no bad teams.
No one's bad.
No one's bad.
No one's
Maybe
bad.
only one great.
Right.
But no one's bad.
Yes, and it makes for some interesting results on a night-to-night basis, and we certainly saw that. I love how you set me up for that. That gets us to our big story. 2 games last night in the Big Ten, and Andy was there for one of them. Michigan ending its 5-game losing streak. They handed Wisconsin its 3rd straight loss, 72-68. Good balance for Michigan. They had 6 players scoring 8 points or more. And then in Evanston, Northwestern ended its 2-game skid, never trailed, 12-point win over the Huskers. Nebraska falling to 0-7 in conference road games. Let's start there. Let's start with Northwestern. This is a win they needed to have, right? I mean, again, you lose 2 in a row. It was the first time all year they had lost consecutive games. Both of them in overtime. It felt like the Purdue game took a lot out of them and really didn't play well against Minnesota. We know how good the Gophers are, and as a result, lost the game in overtime. To come home and to lead from start to finish, literally never trailed in the game, really said something about the resolve of this team.
Which I think has been the narrative of this group that we've seen throughout the course of the season. When they've had either a frustrating defeat, and I think those 2 games, they didn't play poorly.
They played great against Purdue.
No, I was there. Yeah. It was unbelievable. Yeah. It was one of the best games of the year.
Right.
And against Minnesota, we're learning Minnesota's pretty good.
Yes.
So no shame in that. And again, another game they could have won. Both games they could have won. They could have swept that road swing and be in a much better situation. But they've shown resiliency whenever their backs have been against the wall, going way back early in the season. You know, the Mississippi State loss, and then the way they responded in their non-conference. The fact that after Chicago State, they turn around. They didn't play great, but they still turn around and beat DePaul, go down to Phoenix and beat Arizona State. Every time they've been on their heels, they respond. Want to get the news out of the way first. Ty Berry only ended up playing, what did he end up playing? He played only 9 minutes, if I can read that correctly. 6 points, 2 threes. Out with a knee injury, landed awkwardly, and in corresponding with Chris Collins, the head coach, this morning, we don't know anything. We don't know. They're doing testing all day today. Obviously, they're hoping, fingers crossed, that it ends up being something like a sprain, no ligament damage, but it's just an all unknown right now, and that would be a significant injury for this roster, which, as you know, is really thin at every position.
They can ill afford to lose anyone. But Ty Berry is probably, I don't know, you hate to rank players. I mean, Boo Buie is obviously their most important player. Brooks Barnhizer is probably second. And then you can make an argument for Ty Berry or Langborg or, it's not someone you can afford to lose. And as you said, particularly with Northwestern, I mean, they get the 3rd fewest minutes off the bench of any power conference team. They brought in Jordan Clayton. He played last night. He didn't score. I don't think he's scored since maybe November. So, it is an issue. They have another player, Justin Mullins, who they brought in from Denver, who really hasn't played much at all, frankly, in the backcourt. But they are already thin. They're foul prone. I mean, this is a huge issue if you lose Ty Berry.
Yeah, I mean, the hope is kind of like what happened with Juwan Gary.
Right.
Where it looked like that was going to be a significant injury. I know 2 different things,
right.
2 different players, but I mean, there was
Yep.
a lot of fear for Nebraska. He comes back, major contributor. In terms of their 3-point shooting, they hit 11 against Nebraska. Yeah. Berry hit 2 of them before he went out. Langborg was 2 for 9. I think that percentage, if there's no Berry, that has to shrink. But I thought a positive sign was Martinelli hitting 2.
He was great.
Because if he can suddenly be more of a 3-point threat to take a little pressure off Langborg and Boo Buie, that certainly would help. And then of the bigs, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's Hunger is probably the best shooter of the 3.
For sure.
And so could there be scenarios where he ends up being left alone, and Barry's one. I've been at a game where he has made a three. So there are other options potentially. But yes, this would be a significant loss going forward, and they host Penn State. And all these games are big, but that'll be a big game for them this weekend.
Yeah, it's not a game where you're hosting Penn State where you want to be at a deficit in terms of your guards, because the first time they played Penn State, they had a terrible time turning the ball over, figured out a way. Again, it's a positive night for Northwestern, but it is kind of cloaked in this maybe dread a little bit of what's to come here, and hopes that Ty Berry is okay. But I think Boo Buie in the first half essentially said, hey, we're not losing this game. He came out like gangbusters. As you said, Martinelli was fantastic, and maybe they'll have to play a little differently. I mean, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later when we talk about coaching jobs in the Big Ten this year, but one thing Chris Collins has done is really adapted. They're playing a very different style than they played a year ago, so maybe you have to do a few things differently, because we were talking about, Bruce Weber was saying after the game that they really won the game in the second half with defense. I mean, they had a great first half. They scored 47 points. They only scored 33 in the second. They went kind of cold. Bowie didn't have a field goal, but they really locked Nebraska up. Let's talk about the Huskers. Now, 0-7 on the road in the Big Ten. Is it still a team that projects to get in to the NCAA tournament? But at some point along the way, it probably would be a good idea to win a road game.
Yeah, I mean, in the non-conference, and I've said this countless times,
yeah.
The Kansas State road win. Yep. And the way in which they won that, defensively, great effort for them. I think they held them under 60 points. K-State just beat Kansas at home.
Right.
So Bramlage is known as one of the toughest arenas in the country to go in and get a win. That's on the shelf. That's not going anywhere. That helps Nebraska. It'd be great if they could at least get one or two down the stretch. I don't know if they will. But relative to the rest of the field, I still think the metrics are going to be fine for them as long as they don't nosedive. That's the big thing for them. The other thing is, it also feels like sometimes, while Mass has had a good run and Gary's had his moments and Tominaga, unlike, with Northwestern, with Boo Buie, he can definitely deliver when it's crunch time. Jameer Young, need a bucket. Sometimes in Nebraska, I don't know who that's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I would say Northwestern did an incredible job last night with Tominaga and Mast of limiting those two. And again, give them credit defensively, but kind of to your point, I mean, Juwan Gary he gives them an element of toughness that's really impressive. But, C.J. Wilshire's been up and down here recently. He's had a couple really good games, but then can disappear at times. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is the challenge here is if people figure out a way to take away those two big guns, kind of where do they go from there? You mentioned the Kansas State win. It is a good one. They still go to Indiana, Ohio State, and Michigan. I mean, all three of those games feel like those are places.
They can win any of them.
Yeah, where you have a chance to win. It's not like saying, you have to go to Purdue, Illinois, and Wisconsin as your final three. So there's certainly a chance. Again, there's no criteria for the NCAA tournament that says you have to win a conference road game. I just think, if you're 10-0 and 0-10, it makes them wonder a little bit.
One other thing I just want to say that's new, at least newer, that I've been recognizing this season, we've now had two teams within the last month that have played at Illinois, at Northwestern, back-to-back. Because Northwestern has raised its game, that's become now a difficult swing. Maryland, they beat Illinois. A couple days later, they lose to Northwestern.
Right.
Nebraska, overtime game, almost beat Illinois. A couple days later, lose to Northwestern. If you had done that years ago, we got to go to Illinois and then we're Northwestern, we'll at least split.
Right.
Now, I mean, this year, not easy at all. The fact that Maryland almost did it, that would have been a major coup for the Terps. Right. So it's asking a lot now for teams to do this on a two-game road trip back-to-back.
Northwestern yet to lose a conference home game. To your point, Nebraska goes home. They've got Michigan on Saturday, a game you can see on the Big Ten Network. All right, let's talk about the game you were at, Wisconsin and Michigan. Let's start with the winners. I mean, for Michigan, the narrative this year had been lead at half, figure out a way to lose the game. They'd had 9 halftime leads in the Big Ten this year, and they had 2 wins total in conference coming in. And it felt like, wow, here we go again, as they led at the half, and then Wisconsin came back and briefly took a lead in the second half. How did Michigan hold them off?
Well, first of all, it's a weird deal. The fact that McDaniel plays at home and not on the road because of the academics. 3 more road games that for sure he has to sit out. We'll see if that'll even continue they have 1 more road game after that and then the Big Ten tournament. So they're a different team at home versus road. He's their best player. He's their ball dominant player. Ball's in his hands a ton.
Yeah.
He was making great plays early. Then he knocks knees. I saw him at halftime walking back up the tunnel, and he said he's got a big knot on his left knee. His gait was off. So he didn't play during that stretch when they came back. And I think that was, positive for Michigan going forward into this game. The fact that they were able to come back with that other unit. So that's a big positive for them. And I think Terrace Reed, he played some of the best basketball he's played. They look at him for the future as well. As the anchor here, plays with great energy. He's effective in every sense. They got spot play around. I mean, Llewellyn obviously held the fort. And I thought Wisconsin contributed in the way they played to Michigan coming back, taking the lead and holding it.
Right, so let's talk a little bit about that. And Reed was great. I mean, he won his one-on-one matchup with Stephen Crowell, hands down. And Crowell at times can be really good, as we know. Last night was not one of those times. What was interesting, I thought, in that game, and I thought the three of you guys, Kevin and Robbie, and you did a really nice job on the broadcast of pointing this out. Like when Wisconsin was trying to get to the rim, they had incredible success. Now, it seemed like maybe Michigan adapted a little bit in the second half and really dropped back a little bit and were not pressuring on the perimeter quite as much and were more cognizant of, hey, let's cut off these driving lanes. But there was a stretch there where it felt like Wisconsin settled for threes, and I don't know if that's what you're getting at in terms of them helping Michigan. And I thought that was the decisive stretch of the game because that was when Michigan went back on top for good.
I agree with you. I thought that was one issue. I also thought that what Michigan was doing is they might not have been able to stop the ball at times getting to the rim, whether it was Storr or Hepburn, but they were altering the shots.
Yeah.
Same with Tyler Wall, right at that last moment. So it felt like Wisconsin wasn't getting good angles at those layups or attempting to put it off the backboard. They'd get there, and then it wasn't clean at the end because the shot was being altered in some form or fashion. Wall, this is the second game, and I know Purdue, you can't compare to Michigan, but late in the game, Wall gets his shot blocked down a very key possession. There was turnovers. You remember that pass back that was really, I saw Greg Gard's face with A.J. Storr when he passed it back. Yeah. Just like, oh my God, not again. And just because this is a game that they should have won.
Right.
They were in a position to win. Similar to Northwestern, where you had two hard games on the road at Nebraska. Well, actually, one on the road at Nebraska against,
Purdue at home.
Purdue at home, best team in the league. You should have won Nebraska. You gave up a big lead. No one really expected you to beat Purdue, and it was competitive. So if you'd split last week, fine. That's okay. But now you get two, and it becomes three.
Right.
And the next one's at Rutgers, who's, by the way, playing some of the best basketball in this league, who's now got their full complement of players. Not good.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about Wisconsin. So 3 straight losses, and they had lost 2 in a row earlier, the very beginning of the year. And, man, they bounced back in a huge way. They won 6 in a row as a stretch that included a couple of their bigger wins of the year, including Marquette. Now 3 straight losses here for the Badgers. Again, look, they're in great shape. They were a 3 seed, according to Mike, on Tuesday. So maybe you drop a line. Maybe you're a 4, still a protected seed. But are there bigger concerns here about what's going on with the Badgers losing 3 in a row? You talk about like all of them are kind of understandable individually, but when you put 3 of those games together in a row, what concerns you?
Well, they wanted Hepburn to be more aggressive. He was.
He was.
So that's positive.
Yeah, most points he scored since the opener.
Right. So that was a plus. I think Storr is still scoring well, but there's some questionable shot selection at times.
Right.
So that needs to be, tapped down a little bit. Wall, he had 12, but again, it was the timing of when, it's like sort of second game in a row, when he was unable to convert on a big shot. So I would say overall, their late game execution, 3 games in a row, is a major concern. How do you either hold a lead? How do you come back in a game? Turnovers. Things are happening at the wrong times for them right now. They're all correctable. The pieces are there. Getting Blackwell back, they were concerned he wasn't going to play because he hurt his hip against Purdue, so that's a positive. Esigian, he's all over the map. I mean, he missed his 3 field goal attempts. They end up going, 5 for 19. It would really help if he could get back to being a better shooter, because they're going to need him to make some threes when the rest of the guys are struggling.
It has been strange, no doubt, this year for him after an incredible freshman year, and banged up a little bit and then seemed to have lost his spot in the rotation. He's given them some big lifts. I mean, you think about the game against Nebraska at home, he was unbelievable, right? Comes in and he's instant offense, but those moments have been few and far between.
And the one other thing I'll just say is Klesman has had a great run.
Yeah.
It also felt like last night when he took that shot that I think hit the heel of the rim, his 3 late, that they're like, oh, Max will bail us out. And I think that there are times when you wonder, okay, how many times can they go to the Max Klesman well?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Because he'd been bailing them out, Ohio State second half. There'd been a number of games when they've been relying on him. I think if he's your top guy, that's a concern. You don't necessarily, you want him to be your second, third option, where he can, suddenly he's burying threes that we weren't expecting. If you're expecting him to be the guy, that's a concern. So I think he needs to still hit those timely shots.
4 losses in 7 games for the Badgers on the heels of a 6-game win streak, a quad 2 loss. They're still 10-7 against the top 2 quads. I mean, again, the metrics are really, really good, but need to get back to their winning ways, as you said, at Rutgers, then home against Ohio State. 10 Network analyst Autumn Johnson is in Iowa City for that game tonight. She joins us now. Clark needing 66 points to pass Kelsey Plum. She's 206 points from passing Pete Maravich, who is the all-time men's scoring record. She's not going to get to Pistol Pete tonight. I wouldn't totally rule out 66 this evening. You never know. We don't put anything past Caitlin Clark, but still, put into perspective for us, if you would, Autumn, what she is accomplishing.
Man, we're watching Caitlin Clark cement herself as one of the best players in college basketball history of all time. There's no question about it, no doubt about it. And just to soak it in, I want everyone to do that, because it's not every day that we get to witness history unfold to this magnitude and the way she does it. We've been comparing her game to Steph Curry, and Steph Curry didn't even have numbers like this in his collegiate career. But the way he changed the game on the NBA level, Caitlin has done just so at the NCAA level. In the fashion she's done it in, she's having Caitlin Clark range out there. Look at this. There's a 3-point line, and then there's Caitlin Clark range. She has those logo in her bag. She has the step back threes, the buzzer beaters, and more. The fashion that she's done this in has been impressive to watch. And the scoring she's doing is not normal. She's had 51 30-point games and 11 40-point games. So as you mentioned, it's not just the women's record, it's the men's record as well. She's averaging nearly 33 points per game. And she can get to Pistol Pete's record by the time March comes around. So that's really going to be cool to see, but the gravity of what she's doing is in a class of its own.
Yeah, let's give Maravich some credit. 44 points per game without a 3-point line. He was remarkable as well. But in our era, Caitlin is unlike anything that we've seen, and not really realistic to think she would break it tonight. More likely, she would have the chance to do that at Nebraska. There are reserve seats going for more than $2,000 for that game this weekend at Nebraska. It's really crazy. As you look kind of big picture, what's impressed you the most about the season that Caitlin is having?
She has a complete game. We can talk about her scoring nonstop, but the fact that her career stat line is 28 points, 7 rebounds, 8 assists, she has 15 triple doubles for her entire career. Her elite court vision is in a class of its own. And the fact that she's able to create for her teammates, put them in successful positions, she rebounds at a high level, and that's how Iowa pushes pace. They love to push pace and get in transition. So the fact that she starts that and she's the head of the snake for that is the reason why they're so successful and they can score at a high clip. This team is balanced and dangerous, and it starts with Caitlin Clark. This team is going to go as far as she takes them. And I just really love how through it all, the NIL, the media, the attention, she's a humble superstar, and she carries this so well. And she takes pride in the role of growing the game. So I love the fact that she's not only just a consistent, top scorer, and she leads the NCAA in assists, but she also is a leader for this game, and she's been doing a great job as a person on the court and off the court.
Yeah, it's incredible to see the attention that is focused on her. I mean, it's like the Beatles coming to town. It really is. And she does handle it really well. And then you talk about all the other things she does. I mean, we're talking about the scoring, but she's 8th all-time, Autumn, in assists in the NCAA. And this team gets great shots. I mean, they got great shots last year. 75% of their shots were either at the rim or three-pointers, which is essentially what you want in modern basketball. This year, it's 85%. So they're getting even better shots despite losing a couple really good post players. And again, she has a ton to do with that. Let's get into tonight's game. Penn State is really good. I mean, they suffered a loss last time out, but prior to that, they had won 6 straight games. Give us a sense for this matchup and what excites you.
If you love scoring, you better lock into this one. We have the battle on our hands. 2 of the top 5 offenses in the nation, and both teams can shoot the 3 at a high clip. They can both take it to the rim. They have that inside out game, and it's going to be star-studded. We talk about Caitlin Clark, but on the other side, there's McKenna Marisa, who's always a top scorer in the Big Ten, and Ashley Owusu. She sat out for the first 15 games for Penn State, but now she's back and she's given teams nightmares. You have to scout for her. You have to game plan hard for her. So it's really going to be fun to see how this team tries to kind of combat that pace that Iowa loves to run, and they're going to try to do it with their press. That's what's been their bread and butter, not just the offensive end. They can also fluster you when it comes to that full court press. They score, they're right in your face. So it's been fun to watch this team thrive, and I would say they're the most improved team in the Big Ten. Carolyn Keeger has this squad doing some dangerous things and possibly some NCAA tournament aspirations down the stretch.
Right, which is really cool. I mean, this is a program that years ago was fabulous. When Reading Portland was the head coach, this was one of the powerhouse programs in the nation. It hasn't been as good here lately. It's been about 10 years since they've been in the NCAA tournament, with all the attention that's been focused on how good Iowa is and Caitlin Clark, and obviously Indiana gets a lot of the headlines, Ohio State. It does feel like this Penn State story, unless you're really involved in women's college basketball in the Big Ten, hasn't gotten as much attention as perhaps it should. But give us a sense for what Carolyn Keeger has done here. It's kind of been a slow build. She really had to kind of start from the ground floor. But now 5 years in, she's got this thing rolling. How has she done it?
Yeah, I would agree with you, Dave. I mean, Penn State is a sleeper in the nation, and this is a team in week 5. They were ranked in the top 25, sitting at 25. Currently, they have a net ranking of 25. But if you haven't woken up and noticed what Penn State is doing, it is now time to lock into this team. I'm really excited what they do towards Iowa tonight. But Carolyn Keeger has been able to kind of get this team to buy into not just the offensive end, but the defensive end as well. This is a very efficient group. They're number 1 in three-point percentage. They have 9 threes a game, but it's the fact that their press has been giving teams problems, and it's hard to kind of come across it. They're number 4 in turnover margins. They average nearly 20 turnovers per game, and that's paced by Leilani Kapanis, who's top 2 in skills. So she was on the Defensive Player of the Year watch last year, and the fact that she's able to do it at a consistent rate coming into this year has been incredible. But I think the fact that she has her players bought in on both ends has been remarkable.
All right, aside from Caitlin Clark with Iowa, and then you talk about the superstars that Penn State has on their side with McKenna Marisa and Owusu as well, who else should we be watching tonight?
Ooh, I'm looking for Hannah Stolke. I mean, she's one of the best post players in the country. She's one of the most quickest post players in the country. And she's been how Iowa has been so successful this year. Look, we talked about coming into this season, McKenna Warnock not here, Monica Sonano not here. Who steps up? Hannah Stolke from year 1 to year 2, now a sophomore in this league. She has been that calling for this team. She has stepped up everything and more. She's been efficient. She's been able to finish strong. She's able to run the floor at a quick rate that helps Iowa push pace so well. So I'm looking for what Hannah Stolke does and how she kind of works the interior for this team. But this Iowa squad, I mean, they're loaded. They have vets like a Gabby Marshall and a Kate Martin that helps this team go. They are the glue of this team and the X factors of this team. But a balanced squad, I mean, it's going to be star-studded, and you want to lock into it.
Well, you will have one of the best seats in the house tonight. Autumn, enjoy the atmosphere and everything that goes with watching Caitlin Clark in action again, as you said, which should be a really high-scoring, really exciting game. I don't think anyone will be shocked if this game ends up with the winner in triple digits. It'll be a fun basketball game here on the Big Ten Network. Really appreciate you giving us some of your time here on Big Ten Today.
Thank you for having me, Dave. I appreciate it.
Up to the minute, Big Ten standings. Purdue, a game up in the loss column on Illinois. They're up 2 on Wisconsin. Remember, the Boilers' last 2 games are in Champaign and then home against the Badgers. Northwestern back in 4th after last night's win, though they are even in the loss column with Minnesota. All right, so it's time for some power rankings. So define our terms here. Power rankings are like right now. How do you see the top 5? Okay.
I have to do this all the time.
All right.
Power rankings are a snapshot in time, okay? This is not the seedings for the Big Ten tournament, for the NCAA tournament. AP Top 25 is different than the bracket. Okay. Sometimes people don't.
I understand. I just wanted you,
I want people to understand that.
Okay. Okay. So that being said, who is the 5th best team in the Big Ten at this very second?
Northwestern.
Okay.
At this moment in time, I'm going with the Wildcats in this role. We don't know about Ty Berry, but that's irrelevant for this conversation because they won, for the most part, without him against Nebraska. Did lose last week twice on the road. Great win over the Huskers. I think they are a top 5 team. I ultimately think they will finish somewhere in the top 5 in this league.
Trying to get to the NCAA tournament.
You push back at all?
Second straight year. No, I think the Ty Berry thing's huge. I mean, if he's out for a couple weeks, they can probably withstand that. If he's out for the year, I think it's a huge challenge because of how important he is and how much they lack depth. But, last year Julian Roper got hurt and Martinelli got pushed into action and he ended up being great. So, perhaps there'll be a way to overcome it. But there's no one obvious right now on this team that could even come close to replacing Ty Berry.
The other thing I will say that's different than a year ago, we have a month left. But they went in that last game where it could have been a 2 seed or a 9 seed.
Right.
I think the gap has shrunk. They're going to fall somewhere, I think, like 4 to 6 or something like that.
Okay.
That's my prediction.
We'll see. Okay, so who's number 4?
Wisconsin, which is kind of crazy because a week and a half ago, they were flirting with, are they a 1 seed?
They were number 6 in the country.
Yeah.
And now you're saying they're number 4 in the Big Ten.
I mean, the way in which they blew the Nebraska game on the road, obviously didn't beat Purdue at home, which is no shame in that. Did not play well against Michigan. Had a couple of moments, but you're going against one of the lower-ranked teams in the league, not maybe the worst. And now they have Rutgers next. Consistency's lacking, some turnovers late. They should be still one of the top 3 teams in this league, but right now they're hovering in 4. And someone could challenge me right now and say they shouldn't even be 4. Would you say that?
No, I wouldn't, because I mean, I understand kind of your notion of this as a snapshot in time and they've lost 3 in a row. But I mean, I still think you have to take into account the body of work. And the body of work is fabulous. I mean, had they won last night, they would have been tied for 2nd in the country in terms of quad 1 and quad 2 wins on the year. Like, it's pretty remarkable what they've done. And so, again, like, I hear everything you're saying, but I think to push back and say they don't belong in the top 5 or, Northwestern's better than them right now, I just don't see that.
Quick qualifier.
Yeah.
Snapshot in time is not like one day.
Right.
Because I'm not just saying Michigan should be up here.
Yeah.
But it's not all the way back to when they lost to Providence either for Wisconsin.
Right. Yes, it's subtle and nuanced, and only you know the formula. It's top secret, right? And so for the rest of us, it's kind of like old Coke, new Coke. We're just trying to figure it out. Who's number 3?
Minnesota.
Yeah.
Which I never would have said a month or so ago.
Yeah, no, that's you wouldn't have said that a week ago.
I mean, think about what they've accomplished, especially at home. They did go, by the way, and win at Michigan. So not everyone has done that. Some have, but not everyone. And look, they're playing very well at home. They're winning games late. They've got a rising star in Cam Christie. They have one of the best playmakers in the country in Elijah Hawkins. They got a big body in Penn. Garcia is very productive. They've now got some excitement in the barn. They are playing like a top 3 team. And here's a shill moment. Total shill moment. If Minnesota can get to where they're playing at least on Thursday, if not Friday. That's going to significantly help this league at the tournament in the Target Center. Yeah. It needs a boost, and they would bring it.
No doubt. It would be great for the fans in the Twin Cities. I just think it's a really cool story. Now, the issue here is right now, we talk about them like, can they make the NCAA tournament? The bracket matrix, which is a compilation of every bracket on the internet.
Do you know that formula? It's in someone else's head.
Well, it's just every bracket, right? I do know the formula. They take all the brackets and they count up how many brackets you're in. 94 brackets as of this morning. How many do you think Minnesota's in?
Zero.
Yes. So they got a lot of work to do, but they have 5 quad 1 games left. All of them are on the road.
I will be at 3 of them.
Wow. That heightens it.
Great planning by Alex Birchie here, because I'm going to be at 3 of those Minnesota games. Next week at Purdue.
Yeah.
At Illinois.
Right.
At Northwestern.
Right.
They also go to Iowa. And Nebraska.
Okay. I think that's right.
Yes.
Yep.
So win 2 of those, get to 12-8. That's the magic number for them. Get to 12-8. I think they get in.
All right. We shall see.
I mean, 6 more wins.
No, I think 12 wins probably gets them in because of the quality of games.
Yes.
They would have to win along the way. That front line is like, they're legitimately good. Like,
yes.
Let's leave all the NCAA tournament and all that out of it. Like, they're good. And essentially the whole team comes back next year.
Yes.
So they're
we can never assume in today's climate, but I got you.
Leaves Illinois presumably at number 2. I mean, I'm guessing Purdue is 1.
Were you going to say? I was going to say Penn State, maybe, or no?
I don't know.
Illinois 2.
Penn State's playing well, though.
I know, but they're not 2.
Okay.
Illinois has gone through some crazy, maturations of their roster, and now it feels like things have settled, and they're playing some of their best basketball for the most part. A lot of close games, but they're figuring out ways to win. Certainly after that home loss to Maryland, I think they've flipped a little bit better since then. The Ohio State game, the way they held off Nebraska, because Nebraska made that push on them, able to figure out how to win that game. They've got some significant games coming up as well. Certainly the one against Wisconsin, which I think will really determine the seeding.
All right, so finally that leaves us with Purdue.
Yeah, they're the best team in the Big Ten, have been from start to finish, and it's Purdue and UConn in the country. There are 2 elite teams, without question. That's the matchup we all want to see in Phoenix.
All right.
You agree?
I'd like to see any matchup that involves Purdue. To me, it doesn't.
If I gave you Purdue
doesn't matter who they
UConn
play.
on April 8th, would you take it right now?
I would be deliriously happy, but it would have a lot more to do with Purdue than it would with the fact that I used to live in the 860 area code and still hold a little allegiance there. I mean, to me, if Purdue was playing, Loyola Marymount, I'd be happy.
Okay.
It doesn't matter.
All right.
Yeah, but I'm with you. I mean, it would be great. Those teams have separated themselves, it seems like.
Yes.
But Purdue has been pretty consistently the number 1 overall seed on most people's brackets. So,
because of their non-conference record.
Yeah. 3 of their next 4 at home, starting with Indiana on Saturday, the most efficient offense in the country. There is a lot to like, and of course the reigning. It's on the top teams a moment ago. I want to talk about some of the top coaching performances. The caveat here is we're not ranking them.
We are not ranking.
We're not saying
the
number 1.
A lot of ranking lists to go. For these purposes, we're just having a little discussion here.
Just who stood out to you coaching-wise this year and why?
Well, right off the bat, Matt Painter. Okay, all that pressure, lose to FDU, lose to a 16. You have to integrate Lance Jones, Miles Colvin, Cameron Heide. You're hoping Lawyer and Smith have improved. They all have. Obviously, you've got the player of the year. You got to feature him. He's done a great job. I know he's going to be judged on April 9th.
100%. Yep.
Not on March 10th, but he has to be in consideration for Coach of the Year if they win this league outright.
And by the way, no one acknowledges that more than Matt Painter, right? To say, hey, we have to do better in March and hopefully for them early April as well. So he's entirely cognizant.
Yes. Second is Brad Underwood. Again, last spring, he didn't think he was going to have Terrence Shannon or Coleman Hawkins. Ross would be completely different. They thought they were staying in the draft. They both come back. Then he's got to go into the portal. He adds Harmon from Utah Valley, Domask from Southern Illinois, both significant contributors in a variety of ways. Hawkins come back. He deals with the Shannon suspension. out of his control when he's out, when he's on. He had nothing to do with it. It's all way above his head. He's got to integrate him. They've done a good job of trying to figure out this roster, navigate the season. So, again, he has to be on this list.
I'm with you. I think he's done a great job of changing the way they play. They're different offensively than they were a year ago. This is something he did early in his tenure there, where he changed the way they played defense and had great results with it. The adaptability of Brad Underwood has always been the thing that stood out the most for him, to me. And I was talking about it with him last weekend. He was saying that's all Bob Huggins. Bob Huggins said you have to evolve. You have to look at your roster and understand what you have.
Chris Collins, trying to go back-to-back the NCAA tournaments for the first time ever. You lose Chase Audige. You're not going to be as good defensively, but you add in Ryan Langborg from Princeton. You're a better offensive team. We'll see what happens with Barry. He may have to change again how they play, but he's got a go-to guy who's been outstanding. So I think Chris has to be on the list, especially if they get back to tournaments.
Yeah, agree 100%. This is going to be a huge test here coming up over these next few weeks.
Ben Johnson, early in the season looked like, here we go again. They're going to, it's going to snowball. They're not going to win. He has changed the narrative within the season. They're highly competitive. Right now, they're competing for a double bye in the Big Ten tournament. That's unheard of. Again, great pickup with Cam Christie. Elijah Hawkins, one of the best transfers in the country as a playmaker. And then I would add two other guys real quick. Fred Hoiberg, putting themselves in position to be a tournament team. They're playing a little bit differently. His son has had a major contributions. Rink Mass, great transfer from what they wanted to do. That was great. They're in position to be an NCAA tournament team. They've made playing at home significant. And then Greg Gard, who, again, they missed the tournament last season, come back with A.J. Storr, transfer from St. John's. You add John Blackwell. These other guys that all returned, they got better. They're in position to be a top 4 seed in the NCAA tournament.
I'd like to add one more to that list. Mike Rhodes. Mike Rhodes done a phenomenal job. I mean, they had 5% of their scoring back from last year. He had to cobble this roster together in a span of like 2 months. They're going on the road. They're winning games. They're a fun team to watch. So I'd put him. Are you willing to make room for him?
I am.
Okay.
There's room on the bus.
I appreciate it. There's one extra seat.
Yes.
And Mike Rhodes gets to sit in it. Really good. Playing well, as we talked about, back-to-back road wins. Iowa, 1-2 of 3. Now you got to go on the road. What are you watching here?
Well, the guard play, obviously, right off the bat, to tease what we just showed there with Perkins and Baldwin. I love the fight from these Nittany Lions. Love to see if the crowd comes out. It's not always easy during the week in State College. They do have coming up in a couple of weeks' time their game against Illinois and their old gym.
Yeah, that's going to be great.
That's going to be a great atmosphere right
Yep.
here on the Big Ten Network. I think it's February 21st. Another show moment there for you. But anyway, bottom line is both of these teams have the ability to play spoiler role down the stretch and in the Big Ten tournament. They're playing for seeding. No one wants to necessarily play on Wednesday, and neither one of these teams right now, I guess it would shift more. Iowa versus Penn State is in position to play Wednesday. But I think other teams, neither one's going to want to play these two come March in Minneapolis.
Yeah, I agree with you there wholeheartedly. I mean, the style of play that Penn State brings is so difficult to deal with, and we have seen that with some of the upsets that they pulled. And then Iowa can put 90 on you in the blink of an eye, and that's what makes them so tough this year. And, still, we were a week or two ago, we're still looking at Iowa and saying maybe there's a way for them to figure it out and to make it to the dance. Fran McCaffrey is such a good coach. I think to rule them out in any way is a little bit foolish.
Yeah, well, I would say this. Even though they both could play spoilers, even though Penn State's playing a little bit better, if you were to ask me which one of these two teams could win 3 or 4 in a row or 3 games to at least get to Saturday or maybe Sunday, I'd lean Iowa over Penn State. But Penn State, I think, potentially could be a little more trouble here at this point in the season.
Tough schedule stretch here for the Hawkeyes, too. First in a stretch of 4 of 6 on the road for them. We will talk about that game and more tomorrow.
I'm going to be right here. I'm not leaving.